All right, welcome everyone for this 10th installment of our community webinar series. And I'd like to welcome all of you. It's October, so that means it's Lewy Body Dementia Awareness Month. And our theme all month long from now until Halloween is our hashtag there, More Than Memory. So definitely check out different programs we're offering, different resources that we're sharing out and help drive that awareness in your community about Lewy body dementia. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here with our webinar for today. So, as I said, this is our 10th episode of our 2025 series, Mastering Lewy Body Dementia Together. My name is Julia Wood. I'm the Director of Professional and Community Education here at the Lewy Body Dementia Association. We've got a really fun program for you today, with some surprises even. Our mission is to optimize the quality of life for those affected by Lewy body dementias. To do this, we accelerate awareness, advance research for early diagnosis and improved care, and provide comprehensive education and compassionate support. So, a few technical items here to share with you before we get going. Um, so you'll notice that you can launch that closed captioning if you'd like at any time by selecting the show captions at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar at any time during the presentation today. There's also a resources icon on that same toolbar that has links as well as downloadable resources to accompany today's presentation. If you'd like, you can print out the webinar worksheet that's included in those resources to guide you through how to apply today's information. You're encouraged to submit any questions that you have throughout the presentation using that Q&A icon. Following the presentation, we'll address as many questions as we can from that audience pool. My colleague Rose is going to be dropping some links into the chat throughout the presentation, and these links will also be available in your email inbox in about a week from today as part of our thank you email. This presentation is being recorded. I can see it right in front of my screen. We had one time that didn't work out, and so I've definitely lived in fear of it ever since. And so anyone who registered will get that email with that link to go to that recording. And when you leave the session today, a brief survey is going to appear asking for your feedback about today's presentation. We'd greatly appreciate it if you'd take a moment to share your thoughts with us. All right, and we encourage you to keep learning until our next webinar in about a month with our on-demand learning options. Recordings of all of our past webinars and also some other content can be found on our YouTube channel at LBDA TV. And then the Lewy Learning Center. For those of you who have not gone on and set up an account, I encourage you to do so. We've got a variety of courses on topics that you can watch and rewatch and share with friends and family. And you'll notice that even today's presenter, Dawn Heiderscheidt, has a fantastic lesson in the Unpacking Parkinsonism course. So definitely take a look at that. And then also you can check out our Mediflix channel at any time. So this is a great place to watch that film Spark about Robin Williams and his battle with Lewy body dementia, as well as other video offerings that you can share with friends and family. And we encourage you to join our online community and follow us on our social media channels to hear about upcoming webinars and programs. And of course, I encourage you to visit our website at lbda.org for all your other LBDA needs. All right, so with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And we'll learn about who's with us to start in the audience today and what your experience with Lewy body dementia is. So Rose has launched that polling question for you that you can answer on your screen. So we're asking how long you've either been living with LBD, you're a care partner for someone with Lewy or with symptoms, maybe you're a clinician and you treat patients with Lewy, or you're learning or advocating for people. So we've got a range there of 0 to 3 years, 4 to 8 years, 9 to 15 years, and then more than 15. So let's see what we've got. You guys are coming in steady. Looks like most of you are in kind of that 0 to 3 years, which is fantastic. I think you're going to hear a presenter today talk a lot about kind of that early on, getting prepared and not waiting to do those home modifications and think about that. And then also we've got about 40% of you have been living with Lewy about 4 to 8 years. And so you'll notice then too, we've got a smattering of you, about 2% that are between that 9 to 15 years and more to 15 years. So thank you so much for completing that. All right. And so now our next little question for you is, We want to know about the topic. So, how familiar are you with this topic? And so, this might be new to some of you. Maybe you've thought about home modifications, but you haven't really explored it at all. Maybe you feel like you know a little bit about it. You feel very knowledgeable. Maybe you're a professional in this area yourself, or you consider yourself an expert. All right. Well, let these answers keep trickling in too. Thank you all so much. Getting lots of respondents, which is always good. So it looks like the majority so far are coming in that you feel like you know a little bit about the topic. I think that's actually fair. And then we've got about 24% of you, the topic's pretty new. About 10% are feeling pretty knowledgeable with that. So thank you so much. All right. So let me stop sharing that. And so let's meet our presenter today. I really appreciate your responses. That's going to help her tailor her approach. So, Dawn Heiderscheidt is an occupational therapist and the founder of Aurora Independence, which is a mobile home modifications business serving the Philadelphia region. With certifications in universal design and home accessibility, Dawn provides safety assessments and consults on construction projects to help individuals age in place. Thanks so much for joining us, Dawn. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today, and I am very grateful that you guys have invited me in for this webinar. So I will start to share my screen so that we can get started. Fantastic. So, as Julia said, today our topic is talking about home sweet home. And we really want to start tailoring spaces for every phase of Lewy body dementia. And my hope is that today we are able to do that for you. And I can give you some information that you may not have known or help you along the way as you're making decisions. Our objectives today, our ultimate goal, is to help you figure out how to assess your home for safety. We really want to start to understand those potential hazards in your home. We really want to learn how to mitigate them, how to handle those when we realize there is something that might not be working for us. Additionally, we want to adapt those living spaces. We're trying to figure out how to make gradual changes that accommodate to the evolving needs of individuals. Because I think one thing we're going to take away today is that unpredictability is kind of the rule of this. Not every day is going to be the same, so our spaces really need to be flexible. We really do want to start thinking about how do we incorporate different assistive devices so we can explore the benefits of those. We can think about different technologies that could help us and enhance daily living to promote independence and keep our dignity. The other part that we're going to work on is creating a calming atmosphere as much as possible. We want to understand the importance of creating a soothing and familiar environment that really is going to reduce stress and anxiety for those living with and caring for those with Lewy body dementia. So I know that some of you have had this for many years now, thanks to that poll. So I'm going to preach to the choir just a little bit. But before I start any webinar or speak to a large group of individuals, I like to make sure that we are sort of level setting our understanding here. And so what makes Lewy body dementia unique at the home is really a triple threat. We have this motor, cognitive, and visual challenge that occurs, and it can be extremely unpredictable. And this is why we want to start thinking about our homes as being something that can support movement, thinking, seeing, because it's not just about a memory. It's about how the brain, the body, and the senses all start to get to work together or sometimes are disconnected from each other, creating a very unique experience. When we talk about motor challenges, there can be some shuffling gait. We can have rigidity. We can have freezing in place. And all of those things are going to lead to an increase in fall risk. And that's our number one goal, is to try to reduce any falls that we possibly can. When we think about cognition, the rule of thumb is that it's often fluctuating. What we see today may not be who shows up tomorrow. And so there could be confusion. There could be a lack of insight, poor safety awareness. And when we're talking about visual, the third part of that threat is that sometimes there's a lot of hallucinations. We can have visual perceptual issues, so we can misjudge depths. We may think that something that is there isn't really. There could be visual misrepresentations, like mistaking a shadow for a step and then being cautious in a space that we don't need to be, or not recognizing that we need to be cautious in a space because we miss the visual cue. The other thing is that there's changes in sight, behavior, sleep patterns that affect safety at night. And we could also have autonomic changes that are affecting heart rate, blood pressure, digestion. There have been reports of a few of my clients where there'll be times where their loved one is just kind of staring off into space. And so those autonomic changes, that change in attention, that can cause some challenging behaviors for us. And so one of the things that we are really attempting to push today, and to give you one of those takeaways, is that we want to start preparing a little bit sooner than we think, or that we might be emotionally ready to. Because a diagnosis like Lewy body dementia can be a pretty jarring experience. I'm probably, again, speaking to individuals who already know that experience. And so we may be delaying some of our future interventions because we're kind of stuck in this moment of processing what is happening. And that's okay. We don't want to shame anyone for that. But as soon as we can, we do want to start thinking about how safety and autonomy really can coexist. So we want to come at this with a strengths-based mindset. We're not trying to mitigate what someone can't do. We are trying to always support what someone can do. So we don't have to wait for a crisis to make a supportive change. What we want to do is really highlight what an individual is doing well and what a care partner is supporting that person doing well. And that way we can start to get into this idea that small environmental shifts can really preserve dignity later. So that it really is about supporting what a person's doing versus, helping them with something they can't do. So that mindset shift can take some time. It can be hard to do. So we just try it in small little ways to start so that we really can understand how strengths can really work together for as long as possible. And this brings us to a point of sometimes doing more doesn't actually mean you've done enough. And so, one of the things we want to go back to is sort of that idea of a lot of people may throw up a grab bar and say that's okay. But we really want to make sure that that grab bar is the appropriate color. Maybe it's in the right place. Is it the right height for that person? Is it the right shape? And so we want to think about the depth of our interventions, not just the quantity of the changes. So we really want to think about quality over quantity. Because again, there is that triple threat. We have motor, we have cognitive, and we have visual changes. We really think about how those may interplay together to have options that work for the individual, because visual processing challenges do exist. What someone sees may not be what the brain is processing. So what's in front of us may not be our loved one's reality in that moment. And so there might be a misjudging of distances. There could be a hallucination occurring at that moment. And so we really want to try and think about any interventions that we do within the home to be as personal as possible, to try to anticipate when we can. This means that the home really is supporting multiple systems at once. Again, it's not just memory. It's all about mobility and perception and memory and the interplay of all of those things together. I said earlier, and I'm going to say it again, and I will probably repeat it a few times, that unpredictability is kind of the rule. It's not the exception. We have to understand that one day could be really smooth and the next day may include something that's not so smooth. There could be a misstep, there could be a fall, there could be confusion in a space that really wasn't a problem before. And so we really want to think about that and be prepared as often as possible. So modifications really should be, and as often as possible can be, forgiving, flexible, and layered for the individual that's in front of us. Insight and sleep are sometimes game changers. So not every person is going to have all the insight into their problems. So individuals may think their capabilities are a little bit higher than what we may see as care partners or as an occupational therapist. And so we really want to think about how to support that difference in insight and awareness. Nighttime behavior can feel frightening for everybody involved, for the person living with Lewy body, and also for the person who's caretaking for them. There could be a fear of fall, and it could be somebody waking up disoriented. And so homes really need to be safe in the daylight and also sometimes at nighttime, which can be challenging because what works in one environment or one lighting situation may not work as well in the other. And so it can feel really, really overwhelming to hear all of this and say, how am I going to fix this? How am I supposed to address this? How do we anticipate everything? And I'm here to tell you, we probably can't anticipate it all, but this is where careful collaboration with individuals who are maybe farther along in the process or professionals who know what they're, who have a lot of experience is what I want to say. Collaborating together as a team with the person living with, the person caring for, and the professionals who may know what's going on, and coming up with a plan together. Because ultimately, we have to learn how to think of how to assess that home for safety. And as occupational therapists, we tend to focus a lot on something called the PEO model. What that does is it thinks about the person, the environment, and the occupation or the task or goal that that individual is trying to do. So, first off, we think about a person. What is that person bringing with us today? Who are they today in that moment? What strengths do they have today? What's changing in their abilities? Are they seeing things that aren't there? Are they getting kind of overwhelmed by all the choices that we're giving them? Are they showing more motor control issues with freezing or shuffling gaits today? And we really want to think about how we meet the moment, not the memory of what that person was able to do or who they were yesterday. So, thinking about the person in front of us in the moment that we're trying to solve a problem or assess the home. The second part of this is the environment. What supports and barriers already exist based off of who we're seeing today? So, an environment can really support us or it can sabotage us. And my little side story here is I'm dealing with this with almost all my clients here in Philadelphia. I have a client who really does well with a rollator, but they have 6 steps to enter and exit that home, and they live alone, or their care partner isn't there all the time. Well, they can't carry that rollator up and down the steps. So that's a really good example of how you can come up with a solution. The person can have the strength, they can have the ability, but that environment may be the thing that's sabotaging us in that moment. It could be things like too many prized possessions in our way. We could have walkways that are too narrow. Maybe there's a lot of mirrors or shiny surfaces that are creating glare or triggering hallucinations. Are the lights too bright? Are they too dim? What's one thing that we could remove or change to make that environment work for that person? That's kind of the question we want to ask. So once we've sort of figured out who is the person today and what's one thing we can change or remove, we have to start thinking about what is the person actually trying to do? What is the occupation? What is the task? And how can we meet it differently? I think what I find a lot is individuals have a hard time adjusting because they think about, I take dressing, for example. I used to be able to stand to dress. Well, yes, I hear that. That can feel frustrating. But when we think about dressing, dressing's the end goal. And if we can do that mindset shift and think about how you're still getting dressed even if you're sitting. You're doing both of those independently. You've just maybe changed the way that you've done it. So we really want to rework the how by not giving up on the what. So dressing is our end goal. Maybe we just change the way that we do it. And so this is sort of how you can start thinking about the home in general. Who is the person? What's happening in that environment? And what are they actually trying to accomplish in that whole triad there? This is something in a framework that occupational therapists do a lot, but it is also something that as a family, loved one, care partner, person living with dementia or Lewy body, you can do this yourself. It's a little bit of a mindset shift and it can take time. So once we've thought about this framework, we do want to take that into the different phases. Now, officially, there's no medical way to say, okay, you've had this for approximately 3.4 days, so therefore you're now in your middle stages. But I think a lot of individuals, we tend to talk about the stages of Lewy body in a way that kind of makes sense for us. And so most of the times when I'm speaking with people, early stages are you just got diagnosed, maybe the symptoms aren't really taking over. The middle stages may be when you're starting to see a little bit more changes, adaptations, and then obviously the advanced. And so once we've assessed that home and we've started to kind of think about what the person is, what the environment is, what the occupation is, we also want to pair that with what kind of phase or stage are we in. And when we're in those early stages, we really want to reinforce good habits, safe habits. We want to organize any cues that are really effective for a person. We want to start, journaling the things that are working. And the most importantly, we want to preserve someone's identity. Just because we have a diagnosis of Lewy body doesn't mean you are not still yourself. And we really want to focus on reducing any type of fall risk that we possibly can in this moment, because it's all about supporting independence. Early changes are not about control. We're not trying to take away someone's opportunity to do things that are meaningful and engaging for them. What we really want to do is support that independence while reinforcing good habits, organizing it, and preserving our identity. When we get into those middle phases or stages, we really want to start thinking about how to reduce that fall risk if we haven't already been thinking about it. This is the time to really start thinking about it. We want to start thinking about streamlining the process of how we do things. So, how do you get dressed? Are you someone who doesn't think about it at all? And you wake up in the morning and you go into the closet and then you start making decisions? If so, maybe it's choosing outfits the night before. That sort of stuff to reduce cognitive fatigue, cognitive load, and make it as streamlined as possible for everybody involved. We want to reduce overstimulation and thinking about that kind of stuff. So care partners may become a little bit more hands-on, and modifications in those middle stages really do need to serve both individuals that may now be navigating that occupation or that environment. So early stages, again, supporting independence. Middle stages, we're starting to really think about anything we haven't been thinking about before. We really should start trying to think about them now. And then as we move on into those advanced phases and stages, we're starting to think a little bit more about what the home might do to support comfort, safety, security, and reducing that overstimulation. We want to think about how to consider appropriate arousal and balance that stimulation. So it may be a time that we're looking at how the house soothes us, how it creates security, how does it make things easier, how are we supporting sensory or making comfort? Because we're not trying to keep someone busy. We're not trying to keep them engaged in all of this. We really want to make sure that we're using gentle, familiar, rhythmic inputs that help that person stay oriented, soothed, and emotionally connected. So some examples could be when we get into like auditory, maybe we're playing familiar music at this time, especially songs that have a big and long emotional resonance for an individual. We may think about what does a weighted blanket look like for some, or soft fabrics. What type of fabrics do they like to have around them? I think about, in the winter, there's nothing better than a blanket all curled up. How could we simulate that if that's something that our loved one cares about? When it comes to visual, we want to make sure that we're adding things that are soothing to a person and not going to trigger hallucinations. So it could be nature videos, maybe soft light, photo books with familiar faces that make someone feel welcome and loved. There could be rhythmic routines. And what I mean by that is creating this idea that we have a consistent, maybe wind down routine. Whenever it's time for sleep, because we know that sleep disturbances can occur, we have lotion, we have a certain song, we have a certain blanket, we have this sort of nighttime routine that we repeat so that there's a rhythm to our daily activities that can create some predictability and help individuals who may be experiencing more confusion or things like that. So we're kind of thinking about, hey, we want to start thinking about someone's successes and the strengths that they're bringing. We want to start thinking about how does that interplay within the home and how do we think about that in the phases? Because ultimately, We have our framework of how to assess a home. Now we need to understand how things may affect that. So our senses can play a large part in our successes. If the environment is overstimulating, if it's confusing, or if it's uncomfortable, it can become unsafe. And so once we've sort of figured that out, we've taken that moment to look at our person, look at the environment, look at what they're trying to do. And we have to start thinking about how do we actually adapt the spaces now? You've got a good idea, but what do we do to solve it? So in order to adapt living spaces, we really need to figure out what may be causing the problem, what's confusing, what's overstimulating, so that we can start to figure out what's happening. So we need to understand what to look for. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about is the visual perceptual things that may be occurring for our loved one. So red flags that you may notice is your loved one kind of stops walking into certain rooms, certain spaces, or maybe they're tripping, or, they're always kind of having this issue in this one spot. Shadows may cause more confusions or moments of pausing where they kind of walk by a thing and they look uncomfortable. You can recognize maybe some hesitation in certain areas of the home. They may start mistaking certain patterns for people, for holes, for moving objects. I've heard stories of seeing children and pets, and sometimes you realize that it's all about the pattern on the carpet that's kind of triggering that. And why this matters is because Lewy body really does affect and can affect our depth perception and visual processing. I said earlier that sometimes what we see or what's in front of us is not what the person's brain is fully comprehending, processing, or seeing. There can sometimes be a little bit of a disconnect there. And so hallucinations really can be worsened by mirrors, by patterns, by reflections, by shadows. And it might not make sense to us as care partners and individuals who are living with them, but we have to start understanding what they might be seeing. So the question is, what do we do about it? Well, we can try. We can use warm, indirect lighting at night. We can remove mirrors in bedrooms and hallways that may cause confusion. We can avoid busy patterns. So what you'll notice in this picture over here on the left-hand side, that's a pretty busy pattern. So I wanted to show this as a bathroom that is great in a lot of ways. It's a zero entry walk-in. It has really safe grab bars. But because of the visual patterns on those tiles, this may not be the most helpful for someone in regards to their visual perceptual. So it's safe in a lot of physical ways, but it's not necessarily going to be as safe for an individual who's having issues. They may think there's dirt on the tiles. They could get distracted by it. They could think that there's holes in the floor. They could be worried about tripping. So if you look to the right here, this is a better example of a tile bathroom that may not trigger that as much. Again, this is extremely personal. Everyone's journey is very, very unique here. So, with a grain of salt. But I did want to show you the highlight of how both of these bathrooms have very similar features. Grab bars on the sides that they should, overhead shower heads, but the visual perceptual side of it can be vastly different, and it's just based on the tiles that are there. So we really want to think about using high contrast to mark edges of stairs, toilets, beds, so that way we can really support an individual when their vision is affected. This is always a good time for people to start understanding that there are a lot of things to consider with lighting. It is not as simple as just buy a light bulb and put it into your lamp. There are different ways that we refer to lighting. And so I'm going to briefly touch on this just so that you know that it's a thing to consider. So lighting considerations, we have to think about the different terms that exist in the lighting world. So there's something called kelvins. That's kind of the color of our light. So if you ever see on your box of light bulbs that you're buying, like 4000 K. K is referencing kelvins. So certain types of colors have a certain frame, like a range that they are. And I have a photo on the next slide to show you. So it will make sense in just a minute. Lumens, that's how much light is produced. Essentially, how bright is it? This also is kind of related to how many candles it may have taken in order to create that amount of light. And watts is typically what we used to do, right? We used to think about a 60-watt light bulb, and we would know that that's sort of the amount of watts that you want to put into your living room. But lighting has gotten so much more sophisticated to the point that there's actually on some lighting boxes what looks like a nutrition label, but it's all because of the technology that exists in all the light bulbs out there. And it can be very, very overwhelming. So watts is really just the amount of energy a light bulb uses. We typically don't function in watts anymore. Now it's LEDs. And so it's really important to think about what type of light bulb you're buying, what color it is, where you're going to use it. And the other side of lighting is thinking about proper window treatments or glare reduction. There's different types of glare where when light comes in and shines off a shiny object and bounces into your eyes, one, that's just uncomfortable. And two, it can cause a lot of fall risk problems. If you're blinded for a moment, that could be something that staggers you backwards. And if we don't have the balance to catch ourselves, that could be a thing that makes you fall. It also could be a reason why some people don't want to enter certain rooms in the house during certain times of day. I used to have a client that really struggled in the bathroom around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was because that's when the sun came straight through their window and bounced right off the tile directly into her eyes. And so we figured out, hey, let's put up some frosted glass or some of those like sheer curtains, and it reduced that glare just enough that that was no longer a problem. So when we put it all together, you can see in this photo that these are the different types of color lighting that may be good for certain parts of your home and for certain activities. So again, who is our person today? Where and how is the home or the lighting supporting us? And what activity are we trying to complete in that moment? This is where that PEO framework is really coming together. If we're trying to go to bed, we're trying to be cozy, we're trying to be calm and relaxing, a more yellow light actually might be beneficial for that. If we are trying to sleep in a bright white or those daylight sunlight light bulbs that you may have purchased, it can be really jarring. So for somebody who has difficulty sleeping or staying asleep, this 5,000 to 6,500 kelvins may not be the light bulb that you want in your bedroom because that's not going to create an environment that supports that occupation or that task. Neutral or cool lighting is usually a generally middle ground. It's great for kitchens, bathrooms, hobby rooms, basements, garages. Usually you'll see like the 3 to 4,000 kelvins would be in this range. So again, that's the K that's on our lighting box. And then if you're really trying to do something detailed or you need that individual to see really, really well, sunlight or daylight light bulbs might be the best way to support somebody. But we do have to think about what task are they trying to accomplish? What is the person bringing to us today? What strengths do they have? And what part of the house are we going to be in? Again, my favorite is that example of if you're going to go to sleep, you don't want a daylight light bulb in there. You really do want something that's warm or soft. But if this individual is still participating in cooking tasks, we don't necessarily want that warm yellow light. We probably want something that gives really good light so that we can see everything. Then it comes into where are the lights placed? What type of light bulb? Is it only overhead? Is it a task lighting? Is it a sconce? There's a lot to lighting, but for today, we're just going to cover sort of the color of lighting and what that may mean. And then I want to think about hearing. Hearing's another part of this that can create or a really soothing environment, or it can almost contribute to making things a little bit more difficult for us. So red flags that you might be looking for is startling easy at sudden noises. Maybe they're getting agitated during TV with overlapping sounds, trouble following verbal directions in those noisy spaces. That might be part of the confusion. You're talking to them, they're nodding, but you realize something's not translating here. Start thinking about the hearing. What's going on here? Auditory processing can be slower in Lewy body dementia, and so we may want to slow our speech down or just give them a second to process something that might not be something we need all that time for, but our loved one may. Competing background noises and sounds can feel really overwhelming and they can be threatening for some individuals, especially if those sounds are happening at the same time that maybe they're having a hallucination. They could blend those things together and it could escalate potentially. So, what do we want to try? We may want to turn TVs off when we're giving instructions. So, these are going to be our own routines and habits that, as care partners, we may need to change. We may think about using soft background music to create calm. Remember, music that has an emotional resonance may help to calm a person down. And we may want to minimize the clatter from dishes and appliances and fans. Is it a potential to put it behind a door? Could you do it when they're asleep? So that way there's not as many competing sounds here. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do is adapt our homes to be as safe and comfortable as we possibly can and to support an individual's independence. So here we are. We've learned a few red flags that we want to think about. We've learned a little bit more about lighting. We've learned a framework of how we're going to kind of assess that home if we possibly can. And we're learning a few things to try. That leads us into different adaptive techniques that we may want to try to implement. So when we're thinking about how to improve that environment, how do we add adequate contrast to something? We can apply brightly colored tape and important safety features. I do find that sometimes people already have grab bars, but like that bathroom picture where there was the really brightly colored tiles, the grab bars may blend into the background. So sometimes you can buy silicone wraps, you can buy tape to just draw attention to that grab bar. You can offer visual targets within the use of coasters or even tape on the floor. What I have found in the past is that individuals who have a coffee table that happens to be almost the same brown as their hardwood floors, you may find that like glasses being put down are kind of visual perceptual, the depth perception gets off and they drop the glass off the side of the table. So it could be really simple of, hey, do we put a carpet under there that's white? So it's a brown table on a white carpet, and then over there becomes the hardwood again, so you can tell where edges are. Maybe it's putting tape in between the entrance from one room into another, especially if you're in an older home that does not have level thresholds. If there's a little bit of a lip, we can just draw attention to it to say, hey, this is a place that we want to pay attention. There are really, really great adaptations and ways to create more contrast here. So we'll have a few examples of those more towards the end. The other thing that we can do to make that environment more supportive is to support wayfinding. So wayfinding is how someone finds their way, right? How do we get from point A to point B, either within our home or getting back home? So I have found that sometimes painting doors certain colors can help, especially when you're in the early or those middle stages where you're still able to learn new patterns and routines relatively easy so that you can start to learn home always has this color door or the bathroom is this color door. When you learn those new routines and you streamline those routines in that early and middle stages, when it gets to a more advanced stage or when someone needs a little bit more help, they'll already know in their head, orange means toilet, toilet's where I need to go right now. So you could do that. You can add signs with arrows to point to key areas of the home to help someone kind of figure it out without using as much cognitive load. Redundant cues could be helpful. So maybe they, have arrows and they have lighting and they have a brightly colored door, all to find the bathroom in the middle of the night. That way, there's multiple things that help them locate that space. The other thing is to make sure that we just secure our rugs. The joke in the OT world is that we always want to remove all the rugs. We don't. I'm a huge fan of saying that not all rugs need to be removed, but none of the rugs there should cause a tripping hazard. So are you going to secure it? Are you going to get a different type of rug that is less, has a lower pile to it, meaning the thickness? So it doesn't necessarily mean that all rugs need to disappear, but we do really need to be mindful of what that rug does in the environment for the person who's in front of us during the task that they're trying to complete. So if they're trying to rush to a bathroom, a thick rug could be a tripping hazard. So a lower rug may be something that supports them a little bit. And again, we do want to remove those tripping hazards. So are the pathways simple? Are they safe? How straight are they? A good place that I see this often is our bedrooms. Very often we have somebody who, the individual who is living with Lewy body may be on the farthest side of the bed away from the door to the bathroom. So could we switch the bed? Could we switch which side a person sleeps on so that they don't have to go around and do a bunch of 90-degree turns to get to a bathroom? Could they just have a straight shot there? That's one of the easier ways to do it, but that's how we want to start thinking about adapting our home so that it kind of works for us. And it just takes a moment because we get to this other idea of how do we create a calm space for individuals. So we talked a little bit about vision, we talked a little bit about hearing, and now I have a little bit of a case story just to sort of walk us through visual hallucinations and how that environment can help or hurt us. So when we're trying to figure out, is someone having a hallucination, or what do we do, or what's causing the hallucination, there's a few questions here that you can start to ask yourself. First things first is to start trying to track a pattern. When and where do they occur? How often are they happening? And you can ask yourself, what may be causing this visual hallucination, and what changes can we make? Because again, our environment may accidentally be causing problems that we didn't anticipate. So when I did the research for this, I realized there is no strong research study that specifically shows for Lewy body how certain light schemes or texture changes can reduce visual hallucinations. So I don't have a good answer for you. The research really isn't there to say if you do this 100% of the time, you're going to see this. It just isn't out there. The research that is out there, though, is based on case reports. There's some small pilot studies, or there's a lot of expert opinion on it. And so what I have here on the screen for us today is an example of a few things that were happening for a 78-year-old woman. The interview with the family revealed that she was having frequent hallucinations. So these first two pictures, they're labeled D and E here. Those are the two spaces that they identified that were causing problems in these areas. What they realized through tracking the patterns and asking themselves questions and interacting and asking questions to the person who was living with this, that it was the cushions on the sofa that were causing something. There was a pattern on the carpet that was also causing her to see little children or kids in the room. And there was clothing on a hanger that were causing some issues for her. And so the family noticed these patterns, and it became an idea of, okay, what are you seeing? And so she was seeing a boy sitting on a sofa. She was seeing children playing under the table, and then she could see someone in her bedroom. Now, I don't know about you, but for me personally, none of these things make me see those. And I'm not here to judge. All we can do is hear that person's reality and accept who they are with us today and say, okay, you see a kid on the couch. Let's talk about it. So some of the solutions that they came up with for this were some environmental adaptations. So what they ended up doing was the family took away the cushions. If the cushions are causing the problem, let's remove them. They weren't necessary in that space for that family. Second, they were engaging more of a daycare service. So this was changing the environment that the individual spent a lot of time in. So rather than being at home all the time, they would go out to an adult day center, get some social time, spending more time together in the evenings and at night so that they could reduce general anxiety. So they realized that this individual was bringing a lot of anxiety into this. So they figured, let's be more meaningful. Let's engage in something that's a little bit more engaging for this individual. And thirdly, they ended up realizing that one of the coping strategies that could work is that she would try to touch whatever she was seeing. So if she saw children playing on the carpet, she would try to go and touch those visual hallucinations. And so that way the care partners were with her in that, and that helped her feel a little bit more secure in those. So the results of that for this intervention in this case study was that the environmental triggers, they were reduced. If you remove them, they can't trigger it or less likely to trigger it. And so it was reduced. The hallucinations did decrease, but she was starting to feel a little bit more agitation and aggression at nighttime. So again, there's no good reason for this because in another case study I was reading, somebody did similar interventions and their anxiety went down. So this is going to be very, very personal. And what they ended up also doing was putting different pillows over top of the carpet. So in picture F here, you can see that they picked, yep, pillows that have patterns, but what it did was it broke up the pattern in picture E. And that way, what was causing them seeing children playing under the table, she didn't see the children playing under table anymore because the carpet was covered. And so by having her go over and touch the items to talk through it, she ended up realizing that some of those hallucinations were not real, but it reduced her frustration about them. The family felt a little bit better, but we did end up on this case study seeing a little bit more agitation at night, and family was trying to figure that out. So it did increase stress just a little bit because they were hoping that it was going to solve all the problems. And so, what I wanted to do with this case study is really help you see that ultimately we want to create a calm space, but we really do need to use that framework of the person, the environment, and what they're trying to accomplish in that space to help us figure out how do we fix it. Which brings us to the next slide. How do we know when a space is no longer working for us? Right? We could have solved a few problems in early stages, and we're getting into those middle phases where we're starting to notice a little bit more help is needed. Care partners are getting more involved. How do we know it's time to act? So, some of the most obvious ones are that we see an increase in falls, we see an increase in confusion, we see an increase in fatigue management. So, again, fatigue may also be cognitive, not just physical. There could be resistance to certain activities that a person used to like to do, and now more often than not, they're really not wanting to do it. And so, what we have to understand is that spaces really do need to adapt when abilities shift. And it may not happen just once. I think that's one of the hardest ones where people say, I adapted the home. We're done. Why do I have to do more? And the reality is that routines, habits, abilities may change throughout. So this could be something that we need to reevaluate. It's not about a one-time remodel or adaptation. It's really about rechecking your space every time a person's ability changes, which I know hearing that might be like, oh, this is so exhausting. When does it ever end? But I do think that it can get easier when we've sort of learned that framework a little bit more and we're able to really say, who's my person today? What's working? What's not? And then how do we really make sure that the activity that they're trying to accomplish gets accomplished? So you may hear yourself using phrases like, I'm so tired. This is hard. Are we in a new phase? The reality is that cognitive changes are slow, but in my personal opinion of the few people I've met, a lot of them say they do have this realization of like, wait a second, my person is different. This is usually the care partners talking, where they're like, when we're in the thick of things, we didn't see the changes happening, but then suddenly they had a realization that, oh, it's changed. So it's not that the cognition changed quickly, but it's that the realization or the insight may suddenly come aware. So we really want to think about how do we monitor, how do we pivot, how do we adjust as needing, as just as needed, because there really is no major and no quick decline. There is no quick, easy answer always either. When a new behavior emerges, that may be the next time that we realize, hey, I'm not sure if this space is going to work much longer. So we take our time and we reevaluate. Who's our person? What's the environment helping or supporting here? And what is the occupation that they're trying to change? Sometimes it's a very simple modification that we need to make or adaptation to something we've already done. And sometimes you realize, you know what, actually, this environment is still working for now. Let's kind of go from there. So we really start thinking about all those different changes and how they work on and how they are working, because sometimes we have to prioritize and think about what do we change first. So this is always a question I get from people. How do we prioritize when everything feels important right now? As care partners and people living with dementia and people assisting individuals, as a professional assisting individuals living with these, it can feel really daunting when we walk into a space and we're all living in this big swirling storm of things: doctor's appointment, medications, overnight wandering, maybe confusion, hallucinations. Maybe we have a new symptom we haven't figured out how to handle. We're all just very overwhelmed. And so, one of the first things I tell people is that if everything feels urgent, it's really a time to start small. Safety doesn't come from doing it all, but it comes from doing something now. So, again, I'm going to say that one more time. If everything feels urgent, it's a sign to start small. Safety doesn't come from doing it all, it comes from doing something right now. So, we start with what's used most often and has the highest risk. So for some people, that could be a fall risk situation. Hey, they keep stumbling and falling. We have to address that situation right now. And for someone else, it could be something completely different. Next, you want to focus one room, one task, one change at a time. If you've got the mental load and capacity to make multiple changes, feel free to do so. But in my experience, sometimes it really does need to start small. You just pick that one room that's causing the most stress. You pick that one task that is the hardest for us to accomplish, and you just do one thing to see if it works. And then you just kind of build on that. Eventually, you'll get to a point you're asking yourself, well, what's getting in the way today? And I think that that is something I really like people to think about, is be a little bit more in the moment sometimes. If we get too wrapped up in what's going to be or what was, we almost can't see what's happening in front of us. And it's really, really hard to prioritize home modifications, changes, routines, adaptive techniques when we feel so overstressed. Our nervous systems are thinking about the before, the after, and we really need to focus on the what's happening in front of us. So again, if everything feels urgent, start small. Just pick one thing, one room, one task that has the highest risk or that's happening the most often, and think about a solution right there. There does come a point, though, where we have to think about, hey, we made some changes and it's time to start rethinking our plan. So, is the home feeling unsafe despite prior changes? Is there a caregiver or care partner burnout or family distress that's occurring? And is there a new medical need that's outpacing those old modifications? So maybe we made a great modification a year ago, but our person with Lewy body is probably going to be changing, right? If you're an individual living with it, you're probably noticing that some days are better than others. And the reality is, if our home isn't changing with us, it may now be working against us, and we may not even realize it. Again, we also don't want to wait for total collapse. So if we're feeling burnout, if we're finding ourselves saying like, I am so tired, or why does this need to be so hard? It's probably time to reassess the plan that we're working on. It's time to reassess that one occupation. It's time to reassess that one part of that environment so that we can maybe make a change that helps us. Burnout is a legitimate reason to revisit an environment. It is not a sign of failure, okay? So if you're like, we did all this work, I really didn't know that this really should be working. How didn't I think of it before? It's not failure. It just means that something has changed and it's time to revisit it. And a plan that we made 6 months ago was perfect. It may have been exactly right for the person that showed up at that day, at that time 6 months ago. But now there could be different medical needs. There could be incontinence issues. We could have more transferring. We could have hospital equipment that we didn't have before. We could have introduced a new adaptive piece of equipment like a walker or maybe a wheelchair that we didn't have to worry about before. So again, it's not that the old plan failed. It's really that the situation has evolved and we are going to try and evolve with it. There are families that are going to have a lot of different dynamics. Different people and different care partners may bring different strengths or weaknesses to the plan, and those can change as well. So it's not just the person living with Lewy body. It could be the individuals interacting. It could be the environment. It could be the home that's changed as well. So just keep in mind that anyone involved in care may be part of this equation as we're trying to rethink a plan, even if we felt like we already handled it. So how do we create a supportive home as a family? The key here is that we want to involve everybody, especially the person with Lewy body. I can tell you right now, outside of Lewy body, and you take any diagnosis that exists in the world, there is a lot of studies that support that if the person who is supposed to be using that modification or using that adaptation, if they are not involved in that decision-making process, Usually within 6 months, almost 50% of those individuals are no longer using that plan. So we may come in as a professional and say, you need a raised toilet seat. Great. If that individual or the family or the care partners or the caregivers who are being paid to come in don't agree with that plan, more than likely than not, that plan isn't going to be followed through on. So on this first one, we really need to make sure that everyone is involved in the decision-making process. They all get to kind of have a say so that we can try to figure out what the best solution is. We want to be really transparent with others within the home about nighttime behavior. So are there children that are going to be in the home? How do we explain it to them? How do we make sure that they understand it in a way that is age appropriate? Are there cousins or family members or caregivers staying within that home? We want to be as transparent as possible so that everybody feels like they understand what's happening and there isn't suddenly somebody just like banging around in a kitchen, which may sound like an intruder to somebody who doesn't know that nighttime behaviors may occur. So we do want to just make sure that we're being transparent. Everybody involved in the house kind of has what's age appropriate or relationship appropriate for them to know. And we do want to balance that safety and familiarity because it's really not all or nothing. It can't be. We'll drive ourselves absolutely wild if we try to solve all the things, but it is finding a balance between that what's familiar, what's safe, what needs to change, what needs to stay there. And so that's one of the ways that we can create a supportive home as a family, whatever the family looks like, dogs, parents, kids, caregivers, everyone involved. And the question comes, all right, we figured out that our person is here. We know what the environment's there. We know what kind of occupation. We've kind of figured out that we need a plan, but where do you go? Who do you ask for help from? So if you don't know where to start, you can ask a healthcare professional. You can reach out to people at the Lewy Body Association here because there are people who know who to send you to, or they could be the individuals who help you. So ask a healthcare professional, ask your doctor, ask a care partner, reach out to the organizations just to kind of get an idea of how do you triage, who do you go to, how do you ask questions like that. No one really expects you to know what to do all the time, but the first right call can save you time, money, and heartache later. And so not every problem needs a contractor. And I say that as somebody who loves contractors, loves architects, absolutely loves when people want to just install a grab bar. But sometimes what we want to think about is that whole person. We know that the bathroom's unsafe, and yes, the end result may be a contractor, but there could be other pieces to that puzzle that we want to make sure that we're catching. So this is going to start helping you figure out, I mean, do we modify? Do we move? Do we change the routine here? Because we want to make sure that we are not just coming up with a solution. All the well-intentioned solutions may not encompass the entire process. So I do encourage people to ask for help, collaborate with trained professionals that know a little bit more than what you know, because you are the experts of yourselves and your lived experience. And we have people who may know some other professional situations, and then bringing that all together in a collaboration and having everyone speak can really help out. This is also the time that I like to tell people that sometimes the best way to support your loved one and your family situation is to step into a new phase of care. And it's okay. If at some point the home is no longer helping us and it is working against us, I just want to take a moment for those that it may apply to, that it is okay sometimes to step into that new phase of care and explore it. What I would caution everyone here with this is uncomfortable conversation is be comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations and have them as early as you possibly can. Because when it comes time to figure out, are we modifying our home again or are we moving to a different situation? It's so helpful if those conversations have already been primed to be had versus trying to make them in the moment. So let's take a moment. What are our top 3 priorities here? We want to think about what space or behavior is the most concerning today in this moment while we're here. What are one thing that we could reduce that we could change to reduce that challenge? So what could we do here? And who can help make that happen? Our goal is not necessarily, our goal really is, is not comprehensiveness. It's really about clarity. We want to know what we're doing is the thing that needs to be done in that moment. And if it's exhausting, it's actually worth addressing. So those are sort of my takeaways from this portion of it. And Miss Julia, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you letting me come and chat with you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. That was incredible. LBDA family, use your reactions to show Dawn some love for such a great presentation. That was awesome. Thank you so much for all the insight. We'll have some great questions for you in just a moment.
Love it.
Yeah, so you guys, we have a little surprise today. So, Dawn will be joining us again for Q&A in a moment, but for right now, I'd like to introduce my new colleague here, our education manager, Rachel Rose. So we'll bring Rachel on. Excellent. So Rachel T. Rose is an occupational therapist specializing in outpatient rehabilitation. So what's better than two OTs, three OTs now on the line here? And I recruited Rachel back in 2018 to be my co-faculty for the Parkinson's Foundation team training course, and we've been working together ever since. She continues to serve as the lead occupational therapist for the University of Iowa's Interdisciplinary Parkinson's Clinic, and she joined the Lewy Body Dementia Association as education manager this August. So she is new to us, where she's dedicated to expanding awareness and resources on Lewy body dementia. So welcome, Rachel Rose. You're getting lots of love there.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, and thank you, Dawn, for all your amazing content, expertise, and golden nuggets. The next few slides, I'll be chatting about some specific rooms and specific devices that are up for consideration. So as an occupational therapist, I often remind those living with Lewy, care partners, families, that there is no one-size-fits-all approach for Lewy body dementia. Each person's journey is very unique, and the needs at home will shift over time. So that's why we heard from Dawn, and I'm going to echo the sentiment that choosing adaptive equipment and technology should be very thoughtful and personalized. And so here on this slide, there are 5 key items that I would encourage you to ask yourself and ask your care team when discussing and thinking about bringing in some assistive devices into the home. So number 1, does this item improve safety and reduce fall risk? So falls are a major concern with Lewy body dementia, especially as the disease progresses. We have fluctuating motor symptoms, balance, our visuospatial changes can occur. So equipment like grab bars, non-slip mats, and motion sensing lights can help reduce the risk. And we will go into this a little bit more. Item number 2 to really ask yourself is, does this item promote independence and reduce care partner demand? So tools that support self-care like raised toilets, shower chairs, or voice-activated assistants, they really can empower the individual and ease physical and emotional load for the care partners. Number 3 is it intuitive for the individual's current ability? You know, Lewy body dementia often it does impact attention early on. And so we need to think about devices being simple, familiar, and easy to use. Number 4, does it reduce effort and confusion? So really think about how the device can simplify a task. It can help conserve energy, reduce decision making. And so we'll go into a little bit more examples on that as well. And then last but not least, can this be adjusted as needs change? So flexibility is key. Choosing items that can grow with a person's needs is very important. Different types of beds, different seating and positioning supports, or even smart home systems that can be customized over time. So throughout the next few slides, we'll explore adaptive devices and technologies that support safety, comfort, and also dignity. So whether someone's early, middle, or later phases. And then just a little reminder that the goal isn't perfection. It's really creating a home that adapts to the person, not the other way around. So let's talk about one of the most important areas in the home when it comes to safety, the bathroom. So it's a space where slips, falls, confusion can easily occur. Often a lot of our falls happen in the bathroom. So on this slide, I've highlighted several devices that we can consider. And so early on, I do recommend adapting to a seated position for showering. This is a very proactive approach. It promotes safety, comfort, especially when we're experiencing some of those orthostatic hypotension symptoms. So the shower, our blood disperses and that blood pressure can really drop. So that top upper left image is a shower chair with a back and armrest. So these are great. It can be in a tub shower. It can be in a walk-in shower. And then if we just scoot over to the right, there's what we call a tub clamp bar. So there's a tension rod that really screws on. These are really nice. And the black piece shows a lot of high contrast. And so this just helps preserve some balance earlier on with lifting that leg and getting from outside to inside. And it can pair well with the shower stool or chair. And then keep kind of moving over right to the middle, we see that swivel shower chair. That is nice because you can have it positioned to face outside where someone just sits down and then we swivel in and face the shower. Also a nice option for just positioning needs. And if we go down to the bottom left, as progression occurs, this device is called a tub transfer bench. So it's nice. We have the two legs outside, the two legs in. And so you sit and kind of scoot your legs over as well. But it really takes some of the balance work and some of that fall risk out of the equation. Another item to think about is a handheld shower head. So this one has a cuff on there, so it really kind of locks on, prevents falling. So then we kind of reduce bending needs if, picking it back up. And oftentimes there is a wall mount on this too. So it's for easier reaching ability to hang on the shower wall. There's a little graphic on shower bars. So not only entering the shower, but also in the shower. And I prefer them more horizontal than slanted. They just give a little bit more, or the vertical one going in. With those cardinal signs, they just do help prevent some of the hands from slipping, gives a little bit more stability. And with grab bars, as Dawn mentioned, there you can really play around with the contrast, depending on the background of your shower and your tile. If we scoot up to the top row again, you can kind of see those faint lines. Those are called non-slip strips. They usually come with a little scraper tool and they are applied to the surface. And what I like about these is there really is no lip. So it's pretty flush to the surface, but it provides a lot of traction, a lot of grip without being uncomfortable on the skin. So great for fall reduction. And then if we move to the far right of the screen, we have that elevated toilet seat. So it just brings up, you can keep your existing toilet if you haven't had a comfort height toilet, which is a little taller. This one fits right on top and there's different heights that you can choose, but it really does conserve energy and helps with transitioning from seated to standing. And then that last graphic shows some toilet grab bars, and this is what we call a frame. So a lot of stability where they're anchored to the ground. You might see some with the grab bars anchored to the toilet or anchored to the back of the toilet. And this is where a professional can really help finding what's safe and what's most appropriate for your toileting space. We'll continue exploring other areas of the home, but the bathroom is a really great example of how those small changes can make a really big impact. So shifting our focus to the bedroom, we have some more graphics here. So in the upper two left images, we have some examples of bed bars or bed canes. And not only are they to keep someone in, but they do really help with the transition from getting out of bed or sitting back down, especially if we're experiencing some of the stiffness, some of the rigidity with some of those Parkinsonism symptoms early on. With a caveat that these exist, but just making sure that we have a high quality and that we're installing them appropriately and securely so that they are not wiggling or become loose. And then if we go to the right, this is another version of a floor to ceiling grab bar. And that also has the capability for the handles to be readjusted and placed to the needs of the room, or whether you're getting out of a chair, out of bed, or off the couch. So those are another great and sturdy option. I know Dawn had some really good feedback on this type of grab bar pull being really helpful for folks. And then in our bottom graphic, something to think about that I feel like gets overlooked a lot is some of this low lighting night lights or motion sensor lights. So oftentimes when I work with folks, there's a lot of nighttime urination. So I like these motion sensor where they go off when you're sleeping, but the moment your feet hit the floor and that light illuminates the path. So it takes the thought out of it. It takes, some of that dark navigation. It reduces some of that. So it can be very safe, but also create a calm, well-lit path that's not too overwhelming for brightness. And then as toileting needs change, sometimes we might need to do some of the toileting in the bedroom to avoid some of maybe your medications are off and some of the movement is a little bit harder in the middle of the night. So these two options on the right exist. And we have the handheld urinal, which is a non-tip. I like that it's blue, so we have that high color contrast. And then below the image is of a bedside commode. And I think Dawn mentioned this earlier, but this is a great example of, when we talked about the key items a few slides ago, is with the bedside commode, that could be used as a toilet grab bar frame. You put that right over your existing toilet if space permits. You just take the pan out. And so you can use that. And then as needs change, you can bring it into the bedroom. So a little bit closer proximity for using and voiding at night. Oftentimes, these two devices can be used with a gel absorbent pad. So I've worked with a lot of folks and, they're not always enticing to use these devices in the bedroom because, whether it's cultural or personal preference with, having urine near in that room, but those gel absorbent pads turn liquid into gel. They capture the aroma, they prevent some of that liquid. And so it's a nice kind of middle zone for meeting yourself where you're at, reducing fall risk, but then staying hygienic. So again, the key thing to think about is really think ahead and adapt before crisis occurs. These tools can help maintain dignity, reduce care partner strain, and support safer transitions throughout the home. So as we move from the bedroom and bathroom, it's really important to think about the rest of your home, especially hallways, staircases, living rooms, and entryways. So these areas are often used throughout day and night, and small changes can also make a big impact here as well. So I have an image of colorful tape stacked up. So this is what I always had in my clinic, ready for the use. So it's colored neon painter's tape. I know Julia likes to use duct tape a lot too. And so this can really help with visibility. And man, there are many uses for these guys right here. So oftentimes, visual perception can be affected, making it harder to distinguish between depths or edges. So applying this type of contrast tape to the edge of each step, as you see in this middle graphic, it can help clarify where a step begins and ends. It's a simple DIY solution, but it can help reduce some of the missteps. Oftentimes there are glow-in-the-dark options as well, which is a nice little touch. You can also use this tape on the baseboards down a long hallway just to help kind of simulate like a little runway path and more targets to use. Oftentimes we'll use the tape for little X marks a spot for your feet. If you're turning around to use the toilet. Or I've also wrapped a lot around walkers or rollator devices as well. So just some other examples of this neon tape for visibility. In the left graphic, lighting, we talked about lighting in the bedroom and also in these hallways. So there are certain ones you can get installed or you can do just add-on without needing any outlets. So my parents even had them going up and down their stairs as well, and motion sensor lights. So you take, again, the thought out of having to switch a light or reach a certain place before you can have some of that lighting. And then if we look at the top right, there is some couch grab bars. Again, I just want to put the caveat of make sure your cushions and the device you're using are compatible so that they're really anchored in deep and that they're not flimsy. But sometimes with those couches, they just suck you in. And so with some of the stiffness, rigidity that we can feel, it's nice to have a stable surface to push off of. So these exist as well. And then we must, finally, we can't think about the entry points into the home. So adding ramps, adding handrails, well-lit thresholds are all going to make a big difference in accessibility. And so, as always, the goal is to create an environment that adapts to the person's changing needs. And these tools aren't just about safety, they're about preserving your autonomy and reducing stress for both parties. So our next slide, we are going to go into technologies and how they can support some individuals. But it's really important to remember that adopting technology is a personal decision. So not every device will be right for every person. And we all have a role to support informed and respectful choices. So this slide really highlights a lot of kind of a range of smart devices and systems that exist. For example, there are home monitoring systems with certain features that one can even nudge you if they suspect a door is unlocked or a light is left on. There's even another layer of safety where it's peripherally listening if there's glass broken or if it detects smoke. And so it can also send out emergency notifications. There are certain light bulbs that can be timed where they can slowly trickle on in the morning. And you kind of take the thought out of it, or it can be operated through an app, which is very nice. And if we're thinking about kitchen safety, there are a few devices that can even, if they don't detect motion in the kitchen for X amount of time, it shuts the stove off. Or if the microwave detects smoke, it shuts it off. So there are a lot of newer technologies that exist and could be useful. It's just some do require professional installation. Low tech options too is if you have a gas stove, just taking the knobs off or unplugging things altogether and kind of taking the thought out of it as well. And then if we think about certain wearables, there's so many now that have different versions now for fall detection, or they can kind of measure if you've been stumbling while walking. So that's always good information because you can maybe determine where and also share with your healthcare provider. And so these things exist. Also, big calendars that can discuss the time of day, whether it's like 7 a.m. in the morning versus 7 in the afternoon. Just some of those orienting pieces are a nice touch. So technology can be a powerful ally and it can promote quality of life, but it needs to be a personal shared decision as well. And so when we look at our next slide, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with some helpful resources that you can explore after today's webinar, and you will also receive our post-webinar resources. But if we look here on the far left, is a Simple Solutions Hartford guide. This is downloadable, and it does reiterate some good things that Dawn has shared today, some of the devices I've also shined a light on. We have our new and improved Seeing Through Lewy, our visual function booklet that gives some really concrete steps regarding visual perception. There's also an LBDA website that talks about advice for people living with Lewy body dementia. And then last but not least, there's a graphic, just a nod to unpacking Parkinsonisms, and Dawn does have a course, lesson 4, and there is kind of the setup and lineup of what she covers in that, and you have access to that online. So as we close today's session, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways that reflect the heart of what we discussed. So safety does not mean loss of autonomy. These two can and really should coexist. Thoughtful home modifications and adaptive devices aren't just about taking control away, they're really about giving it back in a way that's safe, supported, and respectful of each person's abilities. And then you really can't predict everything, but we can prepare. So Lewy body dementia is unpredictable. We know there's not one set trajectory. Symptoms fluctuate, needs change, and no two journeys are the same, right? I feel like we've heard that many times, and it is so true. But by preparing the environment early and adapting as needed, and this is something I tell a lot of the folks I've worked with, is let's start these changes now so we feel more comfortable. And then we're able to reduce risk and then ease into maybe new transitions, meanwhile, all supporting well-being. And then lastly, your home can support both care and quality of life. And this is a really important message. The home isn't just about a place, it's a partner in care. So with the right tools and mindset, it can nurture safety, comfort, independence, and also dignity at every phase of Lewy body dementia. So thank you for being here today and for your commitment to creating spaces that truly support living for those with Lewy body dementia. And I'll bring back my fellow OTs.
Hey, oh, look at that. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was fantastic. We can go ahead and stop sharing, or if you want to forward and share your contact information, Dawn, you're welcome to do so. But that is going out to everyone as well. All right, you guys. So that was wonderful. We got some great questions here. So I'll go ahead and start it off. Um, so Rachel Rose, you mentioned voice activated assistants, and they were asking what you were referring to and if you could give some examples.
Yes, absolutely. So I will shy away from specific brands. But however, there are certain ones you can get that can be different types of speakers or subscriptions, and they can be set around your house so they can alert family members if there hasn't been activity with a certain device, if there's been a fall. And there are certain home safety devices that like a loved one could set up in their home, and this would also be for someone they could coordinate with someone who maybe is not living in the home too. So there's a couple different tiers, a couple different styles, and there's anything from turning on lights to alerting for other types of safety needs, but just shying away from brands right now.
Anything you want to add to that, Dawn?
No, I think that was a good one. They all come with very different features, sometimes and a lot of similarities. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And then a question here, we'll take Dawn, but Rachel, if you have anything you want to add, do you have any best stores or resources that you like to go to try to find these items?
yeah, when I'm in an exploration phase, I hope it's okay that I'm mentioning it, but Amazon tends to be one of the places I go to, believe it or not. Their return policy is super great. What I always warn people though is you do need to check whether or not all the items you're purchasing can be returned. So some items that are used for toileting are not eligible for returns. So you may want to think just a little harder about what you're purchasing in that moment. But believe it or not, Amazon has been sort of my go-to for the everyday activities and the everyday devices. When I'm looking for something really specific, I will tend to seek out different specific websites. Like there are websites that specialize in adaptive clothing, or there are places that specialize in those smart speakers. But most of the time, Amazon, believe it or not.
Yeah, I agree. Anything you want to add, Rachel?
Yeah, Amazon as well. And then some local DME stores exist too. So sometimes trying it before you buy it. So, and meaning you can go there and kind of try to see if you can transfer on a certain chair or try a certain device, can be helpful too.
Yeah, and you know what? I will also mention here, most likely everyone's from a bunch of different states, but in case people didn't realize, every state does have like a tech library. Some states are more robust than others, but there are some that have like lending libraries, so you can try something out for, a few weeks and then return it. So you'd have to look into your state specific resources, but every state is supposed to have a tech space like that.
Question for you too on that. I know that some Goodwills used to have certified DME. Is that still a thing, or did that go away with COVID? Or
No, I can speak directly for Philadelphia because that's where I live, but the one in Jersey, right across the bridge from Philadelphia, is purely just DME. So yes, again, it may depend on your area, your city, your state, but yeah, those restore places and donation stores are really awesome sometimes.
excellent, excellent. Thank you both. And then we have a question here. Somebody's getting ready to buy new curtains. And so she was wondering, other than avoiding patterns with the curtains, other things to maybe consider when purchasing curtains. Dawn, do you want to go with that one?
Yeah, I would say too, you want to think about where the curtains are going. So, for example, in bedroom, it may be a little bit more expensive, but it might be really nice to have blackout curtains for some people to support that sleep, versus, a living room where you don't want it to be as dark. So, the type of curtain that you get, think about that PEO model just a little bit. What occupation or what task is going to be completed in that space? And that might help you figure those things out. I would also not be afraid to ask for samples to take home. Hold them up in your spaces, ask your loved one, what do they see? Does this elicit anything? Generally speaking, they will give you free samples and you can keep them for a while until you're ready to purchase. So don't be afraid to ask for that.
Excellent. Anything you want to add, Rachel?
No, I think that was beautifully said.
Excellent. And then we have a question here about tax breaks on home modifications. So, Dawn, is that a thing at all that you can get?
It can be. My answer to that is that it's number one, I am not an accountant, so talk to your accountant. Definitely get someone certified to help you through that. From my understanding, and I may misspeak here, so I'm going to explain how I understand it as now, is that there is a certain percentage that needs to be hit, and it has to do with how much money you make
Mhm.
and how much money you spent versus what you're claiming that year. So it's not an easy way to get a tax break, but there is a way to do it. But you really do need to speak with your tax consultant on that one because it's a very complicated formula.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Anything you want to add, Rachel?
Yeah, I just can echo, go with your tax provider. There might be also local or state programs that you can have things covered by. So just knowing what's in your county and your state and knowing who to ask, like there's a lot more available that's not always being used. So I would encourage you to reach out to that level and see what.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
with that, I think state senators generally are a pretty good resource for that. So reach out to your state senators.
Yeah, and town halls as well. So it's often they know who to kind of turn you to.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of times there can be area, agencies on aging that you can go to. We were just in Wisconsin. They have a great aging disability and resource center that will give some support and resources that way. So definitely, if you aren't sure where to start, you could call our Louie line, and they can help support you through that. But absolutely, absolutely. And then I was going to ask too, the VA. So if people have VA benefits, I believe they get a lot more potential access to home modifications. Do you want to touch on that, Dawn?
Yeah, from my understanding there, because I am not a VA provider, but from what I understand, they have benefits that can be accessed. They tend to need to come from a VA provider. So there is a little bit of a limitation, sometimes that you can't always just pay who you want to pay. You kind of have to use who they have approved already. And then I do think it depends on how long you've been in service, what your VA offers, because each VA is the VA, but they all kind of function a little differently in different spaces. So I know that those are factors that play into it.
Absolutely. I've got a great one here for you, Rachel Rose. Their neurologist was horrified that they purchased a lift chair. So use it or lose it is her concern. So they agreed to daily physical therapy for maintaining core strength, but still feel independence and getting in and out of the chairs worth it. So talk to that about and kind of therapy versus buying just something to help them versus kind of all or none, I think too.
Yeah. Oh man, I know that this is a great example of, yeah, the use it or lose it. But you can also, I know I love this saying, use it and improve it. So I love that this individual is in physical therapy. I mean, we don't have a pill for movement or strength, but physical therapy is very close to that. So just practicing in task specific areas. So getting in and out of that chair. Maybe there's some cueing from the care partner that needs to help as well.
Mhm.
But there is something to speak about where the more you do it, the more you do recruit those muscles. You can get those foot positions, maybe that weight shift down. Oftentimes, I use people, I'll record, I'll say, hey, what do you look like? And then we'll do a little intervention and then we'll repeat it. And just some minor changes, minor cueing can really help the person with that standing up. So Yes, I don't know your specific situation, but I would say continue PT and a lot of care partner education. And if you are able to get up, keep doing that, please. Keep doing
Yes.
that as independently as possible.
Yes. I mean, and I just wanted to add too, I think with any of these devices, and this is something that, Dawn spoke so much to those fluctuations. So it's really, a lot of peaks and valleys. So sometime you might need, maybe somebody is completely stuck and rigid, right? And they're really having trouble, maybe especially if they've had say a flu or a cold this time of year and it's made symptoms a lot worse. Maybe we really need that lift chair now, for some help. But trying to continue to do that task, doing that task oriented practice, even if you can do it with a verbal cue, rather than the physical assist, because you can't always have the lift chair there, and being able to get somebody from one surface or get them to stand is really important. So I agree. Try to keep doing it, but sometimes we need the assist if it's there, and that's okay as well. All right, we'll do one. Let's see, maybe one last question here. Let me take a look. We've got some really good ones. One here that I'm going to throw to either one of you, and you guys can kind of, touch on it as you want. How do you know when it's past home modifications? It's time to look at placement. It's time to look at maybe, skilled care or nursing home care. So what do you think are kind of the red flags for that?
I can start on that one. I do very often help families try to figure out, sometimes it just comes down to cost. So how much would it cost to change the home in a way that is going to now support them? And some individuals may find out that it's, full bathroom remodel is just outside of their ability at this moment. And they have certain plans in place, long-term cares, and that maybe it makes more sense to switch. So sometimes it's just a matter of, wow, we'd have to do a huge modification. We're not ready to do that. And I think burnout of the care partners plays a huge part on this. And it's going to be really personal. And that's what I have to say for that right now, because it's really, there's no good way to do it. It's a whole picture.
Absolutely. Anything to add to that, Rachel?
That is that's a common question. And yeah, very, very intimate and very important. I think we think about all the falls that are occurring and the safety of the individual with Lewy. Heaven forbid, we don't want someone to hit their head and then be in the ICU, for example. So, I think really taking a picture, and that's where we reassess with some of these adaptions and we say, is this working? Is this not? What are our other options? And when it becomes where there's detriment to the person with Lewy, that's something to consider for the next stage of living. And then, as Dawn mentioned, I do always think about the care partner too. How are they coping? How are they hanging in there? Stress, some of that burden as well. And I think it's just asking those questions, really observing how people are living, what's working, what's not, and kind of factoring all of those things.
And if I can
Absolutely.
I'll add one personal piece to this. A personal piece that you may not know. We don't share this often, but I have lost both my parents. And what I really do tell a lot of care partners is that one of the things that made that really easy is that we had had so many discussions before that when the time came for us to make a hospice decision, or unfortunately to remove services for my own father, to make the decision to that it was time to go, we had all those discussions already done, and it was so peaceful for us to know that we were doing what my loved one wanted at that moment. And it kind of took away some of that stress. So for anybody who is in those earlier stages because of that pull, this is why I really do push. It's from a personal story of my own. 15 years ago, I was really young when it happened, and it was really, really impactful to be able to have had those discussions. And one of the things that we also discussed was that we really, as loved ones, we wanted to enjoy my parents. I didn't want to remember only caregiving for them. And that was what helped us put my mom on hospice, because we just realized I was only going to remember the bad parts of caring for my mom. And I really just wanted to remember my mother. And so for those of you who are going through that, that's just my personal antidote that may help you make those discussions a little more easy or Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a really good point to make. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And then we'll end it on a little upswing here. So one last question, I lied. When we had a question about how do you, create spaces to really still promote family connectedness, to make it feel warm and not feel clinical, because a lot of times I know we are talking about reducing clutter and things like that. So I'll give each one of you a chance to give some suggestions. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I can start this one. Um, yeah, I saw that question come through. It's such a great question. I think, and that's where we talked about shared decision making. So having each party really involved in picking out the decor, picking out maybe a photo, picking out different types of blankets, pillows, whatnot. I mean, that can really tie into someone's enjoying the space. And then also thinking about the identity of the individual as well. Like, what did they like to do? If it was a photographer, can we have the camera on the mantle? Or, you can really make it your own to make it not feel as clinical. But I think shared decision making and having them a part of the process is one way to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's beautifully said. I think the other side of it too is just remembering that some of the devices that exist out into the market, some are going to lean more clinical, and some actually, if you're willing or have the budget, which I understand can be a barrier, but there are some things that are just really beautiful and super functional. And so just remember that technology has come a long way, design has come a long way. You are not stuck with just what's on Amazon. Even though it's a great place to start, there are some companies that have really prioritized aesthetics and decor as well as safety. And so it's just a matter of doing a little research or reaching out to people who know and who might be able to direct you in a way that helps. So,
Absolutely. And thank you both so much. I want to share just one little anecdote that I noticed. So, when I was in Wisconsin recently with Rachel and we were going to a conference there, I'm a big Frank Lloyd Wright buff, and we went to Taliesin. And something that I noted was that if you've been in a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright houses, you probably noticed that you don't see a lot of bright cobalt or royal blue, right? And Frank's last wife loved blue, this bright blue, and also kind of like shag carpeting. And so there was this carpet, and you could tell she thought a lot and she wanted to give him something that she really loved, but you could really see that he probably was horrified by this Cookie Monster looking rug that then is Taliesin. But I thought it was such a great nod to what we're saying of a lot of times we mean well, we love that person, we want to give them something we love, but we also want to think about maybe what they want in the equation too. So thank you both so much for your insights and all of the information that you shared today. And on behalf of LBDA, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us, and thank both Dawn and Rachel, our new team member here, for sharing their knowledge with us. As a reminder, you're going to get that email in about 1 week with the link for the recording of the presentation, as well as the resources and the links that we mentioned in today's webinar. We invite you to visit our landing page on our website to stay informed about our last 2 webinars of 2025. I can't believe it's over. And also access those past recordings. And Rose will drop that link in the chat for us now. So our penultimate webinar of 2025 will be on Thursday, November 13th, starting at 2 o'clock. In recognition of National Family Caregivers Month, this webinar will be dedicated to care partners of individuals with Lewy body dementia. In this empowering session, led by social worker Laura Rice-Oeschger, we'll explore the transformative practice of self-compassion. Laura will speak about how cultivating kindness towards yourself fosters clarity, strengthens motivation, and enhances the quality of the care that you provide. Most importantly, self-compassion helps preserve your sense of identity and joy. A lot of things we were talking about today, ensuring that you don't lose yourself in the process of caring for others. Finally, please take a moment to complete that survey to let us know what you thought about our content today. And we look forward to seeing you in a month. Thank you both again.
Yeah.